Hey girl, are you sick and tired of just being so overwhelmed and confused with what the best strategies are for truly healing your pelvic floor and core and just overall health? Because I know personally it can be so confusing when you have the best intentions, you're so motivated to heal, whether it's after baby or just because you have pain and aching, or maybe you had kids years ago and you just never took the time to heal and you're feeling ready, but then you open up Instagram or YouTube and you type in postpartum exercises or core exercises and you're just bombarded with all of this information, all of these different exercise options. Many of them are contradicting each other. Can I do sit-ups? Can I not? Can I breathe this way? Can I not? Should I Kegel? Should I not? There are so many contradicting messages out there, and it can be so overwhelming and frustrating. And so I created an online 8-week Restore program that I am so excited about, because this is a self-paced program, but I keep you accountable. There are group coaching calls every week that you can show up to and get more individualized feedback and a custom approach throughout the program, so that you're not second guessing if this is something you should be doing or not. And it's also there to keep you showing up, keep you doing those exercises, keep you working towards those goals, having the support and accountability if you fall off or have a rough week. There is grace built in. There are 5 and 20-minute exercise options, so that if you are busy and you didn't have time to do that good 20-minute exercise like you planned, you can just do that quick 5-minute routine. And hey, maybe some days that doesn't even happen, but you have some of the tools and awareness because of what you learned throughout the program, that you're keeping an eye on all the other little things throughout the day. And this is helping you heal, helping you get out of pain, helping you stop pee your pants, making sure we're not causing prolapse or diastasis recti or all of these other issues that frankly we really should be avoiding and aware of before we even have kids. But some of us aren't getting this information until we're years postpartum and already struggling with a lot of these leaking and prolapse and pain issues. So if you are ready to take the guesswork out and have access to a doctor of physical therapy that specializes in pelvic health, then come over and join my Restore program. This program is for you if you want to be proactive. It's for you if you are pregnant. It's for you if you are postpartum. It's for you if you have pain, leaking, prolapse, all the things. I also throw in a lot of bonus modules where we are looking above and below the body, or above and below the pelvis, I should say, where we are looking at those dysfunctions that could be causing pelvic issues, connecting the whole body and making sure it all works together. There's a nutrition guide, there's a vaginal assessment tool inside there. So many awesome tools and lessons and exercises at your fingertips. And if that's something you're interested in, then send me a message. My details are in the show notes below, and let's get you in Restore now. Hey, I'm your host, Dr. Desiree Cassell. I'm an orthopedic and pelvic floor physical therapist specializing in women's health, aka pelvic floor. I'm a wife, mom of 3, foodie, lover of all things movement and nature, and I'm super passionate about educating, empowering, and supporting other women like you to find and maintain balance throughout all aspects of their lives, without pain, pressure, or peeing their pants. And this is the Balanced Momtality Podcast, where we will talk about all things pelvic floor, your core, and optimizing your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum recovery, providing you with the knowledge and tools so that you can feel like the strong, playful, and happy mom that you and your family deserve. Now let's get you out of those pads and back to loving movement. Fill up your water, pop in those AirPods, roll out your mat, and let's connect. Before we start today's episode, just a quick disclaimer that anything mentioned in this podcast is not meant to treat or diagnose any medical conditions. If you have any questions or concerns about your healthcare needs, please seek the care of your medical provider. This is also a safe space where we will be talking about very sensitive but important topics, such as issues with peeing and pooping, relationships, and even sex. So if you have littles around, probably a good idea to pop those AirPods in. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hey Mama, so glad you can join me for another week on the Balanced Momtality podcast. I hope you caught last week's episode where we dove in a lot more into the specifics of breath work and how to really get into those tight spaces to be preventive and proactive before we see symptoms of pain and leaking and prolapse and diastasis and all those not fun things. So if you missed last week, go check it out because it really goes a lot deeper than just core breathing and feeling that pelvic floor expansion. And on that note of prevention and being proactive, it's been a minute, but I thought it was time to talk about prenatal fitness. And so I really think that this is a time where it is crucial to get started with a physical therapist, especially pelvic floor, so that we can make sure your system is actually ready for baby and for all of those huge changes that are coming your way. So I know personally that when I got pregnant, I started having all those questions run through my head, right? What am I supposed to do now for exercise? I don't want to do something that's going to cause issues, but I also don't want to get too much weight gain, and I want to stay comfortable, and I want a healthy, active baby, and I know exercise is good. So it's just all these endless questions because you're getting told not to do certain exercises, and then other areas are telling you to exercise, but don't do too much, but don't sit too much, and it can be so confusing. And so one of the things I get asked a lot, especially in the childbirth classes that I step into regularly here in my local community, is when should I see a pelvic floor PT? And obviously these women are already pregnant and they are having the impression of postpartum, right? Most of them are saying, yeah, so when should I see you? Like postpartum, when should I make that session? And my answer is always, you should see me now. And you probably should have seen me a few months ago because the sooner the better, especially with that early first trimester term where those hormones are starting to change, but belly hasn't really started to grow yet, and we haven't seen too much pelvic girdle changes. This is where we can make the biggest effect. And going back even further, before you get pregnant, because then we can optimize everything and catch all of those imbalances or dysfunctional movement patterns that would put you at risk for issues when you do get pregnant, hopefully avoiding everything altogether. So again, the sooner the better, and this is really to be proactive and preventive. But during pregnancy, once you're pregnant, we really do want to get a good sense of what your core control is like, meaning, can you brace correctly? Do you know how to engage your pelvic floor with your brace? Because at this point, if you've been listening, you should know that your pelvic floor is the floor of your core. So if I ever mention core, just know that that pelvic floor is the foundational floor of that core system. And so we need to make sure that that core is strong, but we also need to make sure that it's balanced, meaning that we don't have tightness yanking different parts of our skeleton in alignment and our joints, making things more stiff and less mobile, because what that does is it makes other parts of your body way too mobile. And especially during pregnancy, when we have these loosey-goosey ligaments and we have less stability, things will tend to tighten up because it will feel that instability. And if you don't have the strength to support your body, that's how the body and the brain keep you moving and upright, is by locking down those muscles a little bit more. And that tension and tightness is just a vicious cycle, because then it's going to prevent proper core engagement and also change where pressures are going in your body depending on which muscles are tight and engaging or over engaging, or which ones aren't engaging at all. So again, the sooner the better, so we can make sure that that core system's functioning well. We can get a great sense of what is happening in your strength, in your legs, in your upper body. We know there are so many postural changes that happen during pregnancy, right? As that belly starts to grow and pulls the back into more extension, we get that change in our alignment, and this can change the pressure and where things go. And so typically people think pregnancy is what caused all their issues, but I would argue that pregnancy is just that really intense event in your life that tips your system over. Usually there are already some dysfunctions underlying in your body that maybe you already knew about, but they weren't really yelling at you, right? Maybe you knew you had a tight hip flexor that you feel every now and again, or maybe you know that you have a weak core, or maybe you know you leak every once in a while with a sneeze or a cough, but it's nothing to be concerned about, right? Wrong, because these are signs that we are missing this dysfunction. And if you keep ignoring those signs, the leaking, the pain, the weakness, the tightness, this is where we see big injury or huge aggravation of symptoms. So yes, maybe you're that person, you had a little bit of back pain every once in a while, a little bit of leaking here and there. You notice that you just feel weak in your core. Or you have just these little things. Maybe you had a little butt cramp every once in a while, right? It just things that you blow off. But in the big picture, this is your body's way of telling you that there is an imbalance here and some dysfunction and things aren't working well. And so then when we add things like a growing baby, which shifts your organs, puts way more weight on the pelvic floor, changes the pelvic girdle, and also the hormones that are pumping through your body now are changing everything in your body from your feet to your jaw. So we have to take into account that with all of these changes, if we don't do anything about it, we will see issues. Maybe those issues are just feeling super uncomfortable throughout pregnancy. I would say that's still worth it in itself for me to do the work to restore that system, because you can. I personally had been peeing myself for 6 years before I even learned that that was not normal. And so I got pregnant with my second baby my last year of PT school, and I was still not at all thinking of doing pelvic floor PT myself as a PT. But I thought, you know what? I'm still peeing my pants. I'm pregnant again. I know this is only going to get worse with this pregnancy. So I'm going to try and do what I learned in school and see if it actually helps from keeping things from getting worse. That's all I thought was, can I just keep this from getting worse? I don't want more leaking because I already leak with a sneeze or a cough or things like that. I was already avoiding trampolines and I just didn't want it to get worse. But I was so surprised because while I was pregnant, all of my leaking went away. I ended up with no leaking through my second and third pregnancies, and still to this day, I have no leaking. And this is something that we really need to make sure we're prioritizing those little leaks here and there, because that's usually that first sign that we can actually see that things aren't working well. So especially if you have some of those dysfunctional signs of pelvic floor dysfunction, like leaking or heaviness or pain or back pain or hip pain or urgency or frequency or constipation, any of these can be signs that your body isn't working correctly. And so the sooner the better, where we can restore that system and optimize those pressure management strategies and strengthen the muscles that tend to get stretched out and weak during pregnancy, which tend to be that abdominal core line, the pelvic floor. Because of all of that weight, it usually actually tightens, but still can be weak. So we need to make sure that we're strengthening that whole core system during pregnancy. And this is where we need to make sure that you are doing these core exercises correctly, because yes, traditional core, quote unquote core, like crunches or V-sit boat holds, things like that, are probably way too much for you during pregnancy. However, that doesn't mean we're not going to do core work. Everything you do should be core work. And that just means that you're thinking of that brace when you're doing any other exercise or functional movement. But there are definitely core specific exercises that are great during pregnancy that we want to do, because that growing belly is going to continue to stretch out those muscle fibers and make it harder and harder and harder for those muscles to turn on. And so if you're waiting till the second or third trimester just to start these exercises, it will feel frustrating because you might already feel disconnected from that space and be like, I don't even know how to engage my core. I don't even feel much at all happening. Whereas if we get on top of that before the belly starts to stretch out, you can really feel that engagement, and then we can keep that engagement nice and strong throughout pregnancy, all the way up to 42 weeks. I was 2 weeks late with my last little guy, and I was still able to engage that core system and brace my core appropriately. In pregnancy, that bracing, we call it hug baby to spine, because that's essentially what you're doing when you brace. You should see your belly lift up and in. So we don't want to see that pressure come out. So just start feeling that bracing and feeling that core engagement from the bottom up and in, making sure your ribs don't flare out as you engage. We really want that rib cage to gather and collect with the rest of the abdominal wall. And it should hold you in a nice neutral stacked position, which is going to open up that tight back, because that's also what gets really imbalanced because of that pull. Abdominal muscles get stretched out, but the back muscles get so tight. And this is why the breath work is also crucial, because that breath work is going to coordinate that diaphragm and pelvic floor so that you have good pressure management throughout pregnancy. But that breath pressure is also going to come in and internally stretch everything that's tightening up on you. So it's going to open up that tight back and keep those muscles in a position where they can also turn on and support you instead of being super tight and locked up and in a more clenched state. No muscle is functional in a clenched state. Yes, it may be holding your urine in, or it may be holding you upright, but as soon as that muscle unlocks, it's going to have no function and you're going to lose that control and stability. And this is where other things turn on and pressures get shoved in places that they shouldn't. So that balance concept with the core really is crucial. Another reason why my practice and my podcast is partially named The Balanced Momtality, because that balance is something we need to think about when it comes to that core canister. If that pelvic floor is too tight, then it won't be able to have that shock absorption and be able to functionally manage that pressure between your diaphragm when you're breathing. And this will shove pressure into other spaces, which during pregnancy can be on those pelvic organs, increasing risk of prolapse. It can be pressure into that abdominal line, causing more of that diastasis recti, or that gap in the abdominal wall where it becomes too thinned out, where it can't come back together postpartum. These are pressures that are going places they shouldn't. And if those muscles are flexible, then that pressure gets absorbed. But on the other side, if we have muscles that are way too stretched out, maybe that abdominal wall or the pelvic girdle truly is just hanging because there is no support. It's not strong enough. Baby weight maxed it out and it just gave up. Now we have no support, and that muscle is so stretched out that those muscle fibers are going to have a really hard time engaging to feel that support. So especially if you're trying to engage or you're trying to breathe and you just don't feel anything at all, that's where we want to make sure you're lying down first so we can take weight off the pelvic bowl, and then try again. Do you feel expansion? If you don't, it might be way too tight, because the breath really likes to go where there's no resistance. And so where you feel the breath go is usually where things are nice and flexible. So as you work on your breath work, especially if you're doing them in poses like happy baby or a deep squat or child's pose. These are some of my favorite positions to try these, and they are totally safe during pregnancy. In child's pose, I would just open up those knees a little bit in a traditional child's pose, let that belly fit in between your thighs. However, if you still are feeling no back expansion, especially in child's pose, I do like to put a little pillow on the belly. belly. This is not to compress baby. So if you feel it compressing the belly, then take the pillow away. But the goal of the pillow isn't to compress the belly, but it is going to try and keep the belly from expanding with that pressure. So this does usually force that pressure that we see come into the belly actually go into those tight muscles. So we feel it in the back for the first time. We feel it in the tailbone for the first time. We might even feel it in the pelvic floor for the first time in that position. So go through some positions and try different movements to see if you can get that breath into those tight spaces and start balancing out your core system so that when you go to engage that core brace, things can actually turn on like they should. And then you're also catching those tight muscles so that you're not getting pain around ligament pain, back pain, hip flexor pain, lightning crotch. All of these common aches and pains through pregnancy can really be avoided if we are working on stability and balancing that core system. And so during that first trimester, don't prioritize too much exercise if you're tired and exhausted and fatigued and feeling like you're going to throw up and nauseous all the time. That is where we are just thinking about our breathing and sleep and nutrition. We are surviving in that state. But if you feel fine and you are one of the lucky ones that did not get much nausea or morning sickness and maybe your fatigue isn't too bad, then by all means start trying to get some of these core bracing exercises in and definitely start the breath work. But if you're in that second and third trimester and you're already growing, that belly's growing, that pelvic girdle is widening, now is the time. We definitely want to make sure you can keep that engagement throughout pregnancy and feel that support and stability while also still feeling that breath and expansion. And so with that being said, don't go too gung-ho on strengthening. If you're thinking you're weak, we really need to make sure it's because it's truly weak and not because you're too tight before we have you go strengthening. Because you can imagine that if you go doing all this strengthening exercises and you think you're weak because you're having some leaking, so you're thinking of your bracing and your Kegels and you're trying to just really tone up that pelvic floor and core system, now we might have a pelvic floor that is too tight for baby to get through easily. So part of that pelvic floor PT is not only to help make sure you're strong and comfortable and exercising safely, but also to make sure we are preparing your body for birth and delivery, whether you want a vaginal birth or a C-section. We really help optimize the opening of the pelvic girdle, make sure those tissues are soft enough to get out of the way, make sure you have strategies to help breathe baby out and help regulate your pain, help know how to recover postpartum, especially with C-section scar massage and anything else that you might want to keep an eye on in those early postpartum days when no one is really keeping an eye on you and all eyes are on baby. So again, there is so much good stuff that we do in pelvic floor PT, especially in that prenatal pregnancy space. So make sure you're advocating for yourself, because most people are thinking of this as a postpartum recovery resource when really we can be so proactive and preventive by seeing you during pregnancy and even before. So I hope this helped you get a little bit of those thoughts rolling on when and what you should be working on during pregnancy. And if you're wanting more guidance, definitely reach out to me. My information is in the show notes below, but also come join my free and private Facebook group, the Balanced Momtality Wellness and Support. But also, I have had some exciting things happen recently, and I launched my own app. It's called Pelvic Floor Core and More. Download it. It is in the app stores now, which is so exciting. And the first week is free. So you get access to my Pelvic Floor 101 masterclass inside my Restore program. And that just gives you an idea of what that Restore program looks like, and also gives you a great foundational place to start working with the breath work and what those body boundaries are that you might not want to overdo during pregnancy. And definitely reach out if you need more specific guidance. But I hope you're having a great pregnancy, mama, or if you're preparing for birth or preparing for pregnancy now, and you're wanting to get pregnant, then it is also a great time to start some of these foundational aspects to make sure your core is ready for that big, challenging marathon that pregnancy and delivery holds. But otherwise, I'm here for you. If you have any other questions or need some support, make sure you reach out because you are not alone. I am here in your corner cheering you on. And I can't wait to see you next week at the Balanced Momtality podcast. And just check out my Restore program on pelvic floor, core, and more, and I would love to hear what you think of that as well. Till next time, have a great afternoon, and we'll chat soon. Well, that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day. I know you've got so many other important things going on, but I hope it was helpful and you leave here with some tools to help you in your healing journey. And I just want to ask you, if you have found this helpful, to please leave a review on iTunes. Scroll down to the bottom of my podcast page and leave that 5-star review so it can help other women see this information. And also, if you want to be a part of my community of amazing women trying to balance all the things, great tips and insight and sharing stories and just motivating each other along the way, feel free to join my Facebook group, The Balanced Momtality Wellness and Support. I hope to see you here next time on the Balanced Momtality podcast.